The morning air in Chicago clawed at the skin, sharp and unrelenting. Amina Carter pulled her threadbare hoodie tighter around her frame as she crossed East 47th Street toward the Chinatown district, each step echoing on the salt-dusted concrete. She hadn't eaten since the night before, but hunger had become a familiar ache, something she wore like her second skin. What weighed heavier today was the envelope in her pocket. $430. The full amount she had managed to scrape together over 6 months. Her tuition deadline loomed. If she missed it, she'd be dropped from school. No extensions. No exceptions. That envelope was her lifeline. She pushed open the foggy glass door of the bakery, greeted by the warm scent of red bean buns and the familiar clatter of the kitchen. In the back, Mr. Tang, the stoic owner with salt and pepper hair, gave her a half smile as she approached the counter with the delivery bag strapped to her side. "You late again, Amina. I'm sorry." "Train stalled on the south side," she replied, not bothering to explain further. Excuses felt hollow when your whole life was made of delays and detours. Mr. Tang muttered in Mandarin before handing her a small paper bag. 3 deliveries. Fast. "Come back, I pay you." She nodded and turned to leave. As the door shut behind her, she caught a glimpse of herself in the glass, a tall, slender girl with defiant eyes and wine-burnt cheeks, her once kinky hair pressed straight but fighting to curl back. She didn't look 17. She looked tired, like someone who'd seen too much too soon. Later, as she walked toward her last delivery on West Cermak, a sharp gust whipped through the alley beside her. She paused, drawn not by sound, but by the absence of it. Tucked beneath a crumbling brick wall, surrounded by trash bags and slush, sat a man. His face was lost beneath a tangle of gray beard, his coat torn at the shoulder, his skin raw from cold. Their eyes met for only a second. Amina froze, then turned away. But something twisted inside her, slow, insistent guilt. She looked down at the bag in her hand, then back at the man. His lips trembled as he tried to tuck his hands beneath his armpits for warmth. He didn't ask her for anything. She stepped back, hesitant. You hungry?" she asked. No answer. Just a slow blink. She knelt and pulled out a warm pork bun, handing it to him. He didn't take it at first, just looked at her, stunned, as though the gesture itself was harder to believe than the cold. Finally, his fingers brushed hers as he accepted the food. She saw then his nails were cracked, stained with engine grease and something darker. Older. "You need this more than me," she whispered, swallowing the lump in her throat. Then, without thinking, she reached into her jacket, pulled out the envelope, and pressed it gently against his chest. He flinched. "It's not a lot," she murmured, "but it's everything I have." The man looked down at the envelope, eyes widening, then met her gaze again. He didn't speak, but his chin quivered. She stood, turning quickly so he wouldn't see her tears. That night, Amina sat on the edge of her bunk in the South Side Mission, staring at the cracked ceiling. Around her, other girls whispered under blankets, the sound of cheap plastic earbuds buzzing with stolen music. Across from her, her friend Kendra peeked over the covers. "You okay?" Amina forced a smile. "Yeah." Was it worth it? Amina didn't answer. "Girl, I get wanting to help people, but that was your school money." She bit her lip. "I know." There was a long pause, then Kendra sighed. "You're like one of those people who does good things and don't expect anything back. That's not how this world works. You keep giving, this city's gonna eat you alive." Amina lay down, pulling the thin blanket over her chest. "Then let it eat me. I'd rather be kind and broke than safe and selfish." 2 days later, Amina walked past the same alley, unsure why her feet had taken her back. The man was gone. Only a shredded piece of the blanket remained, caught in the rusted corner of a dumpster. She stood there for a moment. The wind pushed against her coat. She almost believed it had been a dream. "You need this more than me." She whispered it again to no one. The snow had started to turn gray along the sidewalks of Bronzeville, slushed and ugly like the edges of the city's forgotten dreams. Amina wrapped a second-hand scarf around her neck and stepped off the bus near the Chinatown Red Line. Her fingers raw from cold and work, curled around a book she'd taken from the shelter's donation shelf, The Soul of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. She wasn't sure if she'd finish at school. Shifts and exhaustion kept stealing her hours, but something about the words made her feel less invisible. She walked past the alley. He was there, not in the same spot exactly, but nearby, closer to the train line now, sitting on an overturned milk crate, his blanket tied like a cape around his shoulders. This time, he looked at her first. "You again," he said, his voice brittle like old paper. "You still alive," she answered with a faint smile. He chuckled dryly. "You gave me enough money to buy a tent and a week's worth of soup. You trying to save the whole world or just one washed-up soul?" Amina shifted awkwardly. "I didn't expect to see you again." "Disappointed?" "No," she said honestly. "Relieved, I guess." The man's hands trembled as he reached for a thermos, which Amina noticed was the same kind the mission handed out during winter drives. Someone else had helped him since. "I'm Xiao," he finally said. She hesitated. "Amina?" They sat there for a minute in silence, the wind hissing past as if trying to push them both out of the world. Then, quietly, she knelt again and handed him the book. "It's about dignity," she said, "and soul." Al raised an eyebrow. "You think I got either?" "I think you're trying." Over the following weeks, their encounters became a quiet ritual. Amina would bring tea, sometimes leftovers from the school cafeteria, and books she thought might matter. Xiao, in turn, really listened. When she spoke about school, about failing calculus one semester, about the way the guidance counselor looked at her with pity and polite distance, Xiao didn't interrupt or offer advice. He just nodded once. She asked him why he ended up on the street. He didn't answer right away. "That's a long story," he muttered. "Too long for a 17-year-old girl who should be solving equations and building satellites." She laughed. "Maybe, but I think I'd rather build people." He looked at her for a long time, but then said something she'd never forget. "Then promise me you won't break yourself doing it." Meanwhile, downtown, glass and steel glistened beneath spring sun. At the top of the Brooks Tech Tower, Malcolm A. Brooks reviewed reports, his expression unreadable. The man was a paradox of sharp suits and colder silences, a calculated presence. In every boardroom, his assistants called him brilliant, his critics heartless. Malcolm didn't care till that morning. A junior receptionist buzzed in with hesitation. "Sir, it's been a man outside. For 3 days now, he keeps trying to leave notes. Security thought it was junk, but today, one of the notes had your name." Malcolm didn't react. "What name?" The man said he's Xiao Brooks. His hands stilled above the keyboard. "I'll check the security footage," he said calmly. 10 minutes later, he stared at a grainy image. A man with graying hair, hunched, wild-eyed, stood at the edge of the Brooks Tech lobby, speaking to no one, clutching a torn notebook, and wearing a coat that looked like it had seen 100 winters. But the eyes, ... Malcolm zoomed in, and the past came crashing down. He stood. "Tell security, I don't want him near this building again." "Yes, sir." But long after the screen went black, Malcolm remained still, hands clenched, breath shallow. The ghost of a boy screaming behind his ribcage. Back in Bronzeville, Amina helped Xiao move into the Southside Mission's transitional shelter. She vouched for him with Sister Ellen, who managed the intake process. Despite warnings that older men often relapsed, disappeared, or caused trouble. "I'll keep checking on him," she promised. Sister Ellen raised an eyebrow. This isn't a pet project, Amina. Be careful. I'm not doing this to feel good about myself, she replied. I see him. Xiao kept to himself in the shelter. He slept on the top bunk. Never asked for more than what he was given. But every evening, he sat with Amina under the flickering hallway light, reading the books she brought. Sometimes they talked about poetry, other times about silence. One night, Xiao said something unexpected. You remind me of someone. A boy. Smart. Too serious for his age. Always drawing things, motions, circuits, futures. Xiao swallowed. My son? Amina paused. Where is he? Xiao looked away. He doesn't want to find me. 2 weeks later, a flyer appeared on the mission bulletin board. Brooks Foundation Young Voices Gala seeking student speakers. Amina rolled her eyes at first. The poster was printed in gold, the kind of gold that smelled like rich people pretending to understand poverty. But Sister Ellen insisted she apply. A month after, she was standing in a borrowed dress waiting backstage at the Four Seasons Hotel, heart thudding in her chest. She had practiced her speech 100 times, still didn't feel ready. Next up, said the announcer, Amina Carter, from the Southside Mission Youth Tutoring Program. She stepped into the light. Sometimes, she said into the microphone, the smallest act of kindness is a revolution. I've learned that dignity doesn't always come from success. It can come from showing up, from seeing someone no one else sees. She scanned the crowd. Corporate suits, press, wealth. And then her eyes landed on a face in the second row. Malcolm Brooks. He was still, but his gaze didn't meet hers, drifted past her, to a hallway projection on the screen. Behind her, slideshow showing photos of the mission. One image stopped him cold. Zhao, sitting beside Amina, smiling. Malcolm stared at the screen in disbelief. The photo, just one among many in the slideshow behind Amina, was grainy, but there was no mistaking the face. His father, sitting beside the girl who now stood on stage, speaking with conviction and warmth. Xiao looked older, worn down, but unmistakably himself. The tilt of his head, the way his hands curled around the edge of the bench. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a ghost. It was real. Malcolm rose abruptly from his seat. An assistant tried to follow, but he shook him off. He left the ballroom, pushing through the double doors and into the hallway. The sound of Amina's voice echoed behind him. Every time I feel like giving up, I remember what one man told me. That dignity isn't given, it's reclaimed. He couldn't breathe. Amina found herself ushered backstage moments. After the applause, she clutched her speech, her hands shaking, unsure whether it had gone well or not. A tall man in a gray suit approached. Mr. Brooks would like a word, he said. She blinked. The CEO, the man nodded. He's waiting in the executive suite. The room on the 45th floor was blinding in its design, floor-to-ceiling windows, a wall of digital screens, and not a single object out of place. It felt more like a control room than an office. Amina stood stiff at the center as Malcolm entered from a side door. Jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He studied her like she was a puzzle. You've been spending time with a man named Xiao, he said. She blinked. Yes. Where did you meet him? On the street. I gave him some food, some money. Why? Because he looked cold, hungry, lost. Malcolm leaned forward. Do you know who he is? I do now. His jaw tightened. Why didn't you tell anyone? I didn't know it was your father, she said softly. He never said your name. It's only that he had a son he hadn't seen in a long time. A boy who used to draw futures. Malcolm froze. Silence fell over the room like fog. He told me he'd messed up, she continued. But he never asked for pity. He never blamed you. He was just trying to find a way back to himself. Malcolm looked out the window, blinking hard. You think he deserves a second chance? I think we all do. 3 days passed. Malcolm didn't call her again. Amina assumed it was over, that he'd rejected Zhao once more, buried the past like so many others did. But then Sister Ellen called her into her office. Sitting on the desk was an envelope. He came here last night, the nun said. Your friend Zhao. Amina opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a worn notebook taped together at the spine. Its cover had been water damaged. The pages inside were yellowed and fragile. The first page read, "For Malcolm, in case I never find the words face to face." Her heart stopped. That night, Amina made her way to the Brooksteck Tower again. She had no appointment, no invitation. But the receptionist recognized her and waved her through with wide eyes. When she entered the suite, Malcolm was already there, standing alone, tie loosened. Staring out into the Chicago night, she held out the notebook. He wanted you to have. This said I'd know the right moment. He took it without a word. She waited, then turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she heard the sound of pages turning, and then his voice. Dear Malcolm, he read aloud. I know I forfeited the right to be called your father. I know I disappeared when you needed someone most. I wish I could say I had a reason that would make sense, but the truth is, I was broken, and I didn't want to pass that brokenness to you. Malcolm sat, his fingers trembled. Aminah. Stood frozen, unsure if she should stay or go. He kept reading. I watched you grow from afar, even when I had nothing. I saw your first company launch in a newspaper, clipped it, kept it in my pocket for months. You've done everything I never could, and I'm proud of you more than I have words for. Malcolm exhaled, choked. Amina sat across from him, silent. He flipped to another letter. If you're reading this, it means I was too much a coward to say it out loud. But son, I never stopped loving you. And I never stopped hoping you might find it in your heart to forgive me, not for me, but for you. Because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. His voice cracked, the room fell into stillness. I thought he left because he didn't care, Malcolm whispered. That I wasn't enough. He never believed that, Amina said. He believed he wasn't enough for you. Malcolm closed the notebook. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, he looked at her. Where is he now? 2 days later, Malcolm stood beside Amina at the entrance of a private rehab facility on the outskirts of the city. Zhao was waiting inside, thin but alert, dressed in clean clothes, his beard trimmed. When he saw Malcolm, he rose slowly. There, eyes locked, neither moved. Then Zhao took a step forward. I didn't expect. I read them, Malcolm said. All of them. Zhao swallowed. I never asked. I know. A beat. Then Malcolm stepped forward and without a word, placed a hand on his father's shoulder. Not an embrace. Not yet, but something close. Something beginning. Zhao's health deteriorated quickly that spring. Years on the street had taken their toll, but his spirit remained lucid. Amina visited every week. They read books together, talked about cities and bridges and memories. One afternoon, as sunlight pooled through the window, Zhao turned to her. You gave me back a part of my son, he said. And I have nothing to give you in return. You already did, she whispered. It reminded me that one act of kindness can echo farther than we ever imagine. Zhao died quietly in June. Malcolm arranged the funeral himself, simple, dignified. Just a few chairs, soft music, and a single photo. Zhao and a young Malcolm on a fishing pier 25 years ago. It had been buried in one of Zhao's coat. Pockets folded in 4, still intact at the service. Amina was invited to speak. She took the podium. Notebook in hand, Shao Brooks taught me that generosity isn't about what we can spare, it's about what we're willing to lose for someone else's dignity. He lost a lot, but he never lost his hope, and he never stopped writing letters to the son he loved. She opened to a page. One day, maybe you'll understand that I left not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much to let you see me fall apart. There were tears in every eye. Malcolm stood, shoulders heavy but somehow lighter than before. After the funeral, Malcolm approached Amina in the garden outside the chapel. "I want to offer you something," he said. "A full scholarship. Room, board, everything. You deserve it." Amina stared at him. "You don't have to, I do," he interrupted. "Not because of guilt or charity, but because my father saw something in you that reminded him of the best parts of himself, and I see it too." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll accept it," she said. "But only if I can keep tutoring at the shelter." He smiled for the first time in weeks. "Deal." Summer in Chicago always carried a kind of defiant beauty. The city bloomed through its wounds, pushing green through cracks in the concrete. On campus at the University of Illinois at Chicago, Amina Carter moved through the halls with a quiet intensity. Her scholarship paperwork had cleared. Her dorm room and narrow space overlooking the street was small but hers. She had never had a door that locked before, at night. She still wrapped her coat around her feet to sleep. Some habits were hard to unlearn. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she returned to the South Side Mission. She kept her tutoring sessions, just like she'd promised. The kids there, especially the ones who never spoke in class, clung to her presence like oxygen. One boy, Marcus, refused to speak to anyone unless Amina was in the room. "You're like a math whisperer," Sister Ellen joked. Amina smiled. There was a weight behind it. Zhao was gone. Every time she passed the bench near the old shelter entrance, the spot where she'd first found him, shaking under that torn blanket, she paused. Sometimes she swore she still saw him sitting there, hands folded in his lap, waiting for her next book. Malcolm Brooks kept his promise too. He visited the rehab center quarterly, speaking to recovering men about resilience. His speech was blunt, without fluff or performance. "My father taught me about failure," he said once. "And he taught me about coming back from it." He didn't lecture, he lived it. The media didn't love this version of Malcolm. They preferred the cold, invulnerable genius. But those inside the rooms, those sitting in plastic chairs with trembling hands and hollow stomachs, they listened. Because he wasn't talking about profits anymore. He was talking about dignity. One weekend in September, Amina received a call from Malcolm's assistant. "Mr. Brooks is speaking at the National Equity Forum in D.C. He wants you to join the delegation." She hesitated. "Why me?" "He says you remind people what the fight is for." A week later, she stood on stage in a navy blue blazer 2 sizes too big, staring into the lights of a grand conference hall. Her palms sweated. Her knees locked. But when she began to speak, her voice didn't waver. "I'm here because someone gave me a second chance. A man the world had written off. A man most people walked past. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't own a house. But he gave me more than anyone ever had. He saw me." The room held its breath. "I think the question isn't whether the poor deserve dignity," she said. "The real question is why we ever thought they didn't." After the event, Malcolm found her backstage, leaning against the wall. "Heart still racing? You did well," he said. "I thought I might pass out." "Me too." The first time she glanced at him. "Do you ever think about him?" "All the time." A long pause passed. "Do you still read the letters?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "I keep one in my wallet." He pulled it out, creased and soft from folding. He held it up. "You'll build something someday. I just hope it doesn't cost you your heart." Amina smiled. "He always said things like that." "Yeah, he did." Months went by. Brooks Tech launched a new division. The Zhao Initiative focused on tech solutions for housing insecurity. It funded mobile clinics, transitional shelters, and digital platforms that connected people with local aid without the red tape. Amina helped shape its youth leadership program. She wasn't just a name on a brochure anymore. She was in the meetings, the strategy sessions, the decisions, and sometimes when Malcolm fell silent during board reviews, she'd glance at him and know he was remembering his father's voice. Somewhere behind the numbers, one evening in winter, Amina returned to her dorm to find a box outside her door. No label, no note. Inside was Zhao's worn notebook. She opened it. Flipping past the letters to Malcolm pages she had read a dozen times, so she found a section she'd missed. Her name for Amina. It began, "You reminded me that I still had something to give. You didn't see a homeless man. You saw a person, and you helped me remember who I was before I disappeared. I want you to know that you're not just kind, you're fierce. You don't back down. Hold on to that. And when the world tries to tell you you're small, remember, it only says that because it's afraid of you." Tears filled her eyes, not of grief, but of recognition. That spring, she gave a workshop at a local high school. She walked into the classroom chalk-stained walls, cracked windows, restless energy, and paused. A boy in the back slouched hood pulled over his eyes. She recognized that posture. It was hers years ago. "Hey," she said. "I see you." His eyes flickered up. She didn't look away. At a gala a few weeks later, Malcolm stood before a crowd of venture capitalists and policy wonks, giving his usual speech about data-driven change. But then, mid-sentence, he stopped. He glanced at Amina, who stood near the back in a plain dress, arms folded, watching with her steady, unblinking gaze. He stepped away from the podium. "I want to tell you about a girl," he said. "She gave up her tuition money to feed a man the rest of us stepped over. That accessible humanor through everything I believed about success. It reminded me that people don't need saving, they need to be seen." Silence filled the room then, applause. But Malcolm barely heard it. He was looking inward, at the letter in his pocket, at the ghost of a father who had once said, "Don't let the world take your heart from you." The day Amina walked across the graduation stage at the University of Illinois, the air smelled of spring and second chances. The audience clapped politely for each name read aloud. But when they announced Amina Carter, Bachelor of Science in Engineering with honors, a small crowd in the corner erupted in cheers. Some were shelter staff. Others were kids from her old tutoring program, now a full-blown youth initiative funded by the Zhao Brooks Legacy Grant. And standing at the edge of the crowd, hands tucked into his coat, was Malcolm. No suit, no tie, just a man watching someone else rise. Amina walked down the steps, diploma in hand. She didn't look for applause. Her eyes were searching, and there he was. She smiled, he nodded. They met afterward by the fountain, near the old science building. She took off her cap and ran her fingers through her hair, now coiled tightly in its natural shape, not as a statement, but simply because it was hers. "You did it," Malcolm said quietly. "We did it," she corrected. They sat on a low wall, the hum of celebration all around them. Malcolm reached into his coat and pulled out a small box, wrapped in recycled paper. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a pendant, a tiny compass, gold-edged, delicate. Amina ran her thumb over it. "It's beautiful." "It belonged to my father," Malcolm said. "Before everything, he used to say, no matter how far you get lost, find true north and follow it home." She looked up, eyes shining. "Thank you." It's yours now. That summer, Amina was invited to speak at the Global Equity Summit in Geneva. It was her first time leaving the country. She nearly didn't go nervous about being seen as a symbol rather than a person. But Malcolm convinced her. They're not looking for a symbol, he'd said. They're looking for someone who actually lived it. At the summit, her speech didn't rely on statistics or slogans. Instead, she told a story. Once I gave away everything I had to a man on the street, she said. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his past. I just knew he looked cold. She paused, and that man changed my life more than I changed his. The audience sat still. I stand here not because I'm exceptional, but because someone saw me when I was invisible. And someone everyone else gave up on, gave me hope. She stepped back from the podium to a standing ovation. But what stayed with her wasn't the applause, it was the silence. Just before, the moment they listened, really listened back home, the Southside mission expanded. With Malcolm's funding, it now offered not only meals and beds, but tech literacy, classes, counseling, job placement. The tutoring program Amina started had grown into a network across 4 shelters. She was no longer the only one. Other girls like her had stepped up. Some younger, some stronger, but all of them knew her name. One day, years later, Amina returned to the alley near Chinatown, the one where it all began. The building had been torn down. In its place stood a small community garden, an odd patch of green in a city built from steel. She walked between the rows of vegetables and herbs, breathing in the scent of basil and earth. A small plaque by the gate caught her eye in memory of Xiaowei Brooks. Dignity is not given, it is reclaimed. She knelt and touched the metal. With her fingertips, "Hey, old man," she whispered. "We made it." That evening, she visited Malcolm's home, a modest apartment near the lake. Not the glass tower he used to rule from. He answered the door in slippers, a book in one hand. "You still reading letters?" she teased. "Always." He let her. In his living room was filled with plants now, sunlight, and laughter from the neighbors' children through the open window. "I've been thinking about something," he said as he poured them tea. "Starting a foundation under your name." She arched an eyebrow. "That's a little much, isn't it?" "Maybe, but you're more than a success story. You're proof that kindness works." Amina took a sip. "Then don't name it after me. Name it after what we both lost and found." They launched the North Star Project that fall, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting youth aging out of the foster system. No flashy launches, no celebrity endorsements, just real work. Real kids, real nights where it felt like the world might fall apart, and mornings where it didn't. Every year, on the anniversary of Zhao's passing, Amina lit a candle. Not because he needed it, but because she did. One snowy December, Malcolm stood at the edge of a high school auditorium, listening to a panel of teens speak about their projects. One girl, maybe 16, spoke of redesigning solar panels for mobile shelters. "She reminds me of you," he said to Amina, who was standing beside him, arms crossed, watching with pride. "No," she said. "She's better." He smiled. "Xiao would have loved this." "I think he does," she said, as they walked outside. Flakes began to fall, soft, quiet, unannounced. Amina looked up at the sky. "We came from nothing," she said. "Now," Malcolm nodded. "Now, we make sure no one else feels like nothing ever again." They stood in the quiet, the city glowing around them, not saved, not perfect, but seen.